Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. And today I'm going to complete a series of films starring Isabelle Huppert. Three films. So my first one that I talked about was La Cérémonie, and then I talked about The Piano Teacher in my last video. And today's Isabelle Huppert movie is White Material, and this is from 2009 and is directed by Claire Denis. This is a film set in a fictionalized African country. This is a post-colonial era. It's a country that's besieged by civil war. And this civil war is bearing down on a coffee plantation that is owned by Isabelle Huppert, her character named Marie, Marie's ex-father-in-law. But Marie is the one who is running the plantation. All the other all the other French owners of the coffee plantations in this area have left, but Marie is just adamant that she is going to stay. The French soldiers, as they leave, they urge her, please, you have to leave. Your life is in danger. So Marie is actually running this coffee plantation. Her father-in-law is ill. He's elderly. He's ill. His son, played by Christopher Lambert, Maria's ex-husband, is living in the main house with his father and his second wife and their young son. And Maria lives in an adjacent house with their son, who is probably like a late teenager, and he is bedridden, and for no reason except that he's a bit of a wastrel. But Marie dotes on him, so it's kind of a strange family situation. But Marie seems the only one who has the energy to go on, and the determination. Her ex-husband is for getting out. But to her, this is where she feels her roots are, and and there's also another character, and this is the boxer, and he is one of the leaders of the rebel army, and very charismatic and looked up to by. These rebels are mostly like, as they're depicted, are mostly like children soldiers. But he's seriously wounded, and he seeks refuge secretively at the Marie's coffee plantation. And when she discovers him, Marie has no white-black thinking, no politics, rebels, government, but she treats people well, and she tries to help the boxer out. But he is very seriously wounded. The boxer is played by Isaac de Bacalet, and he was also in Claire Denis' debut film, Chocolat. So this is a film that is very much about dread and pending doom. Marie's workers, this is the harvest time. They leave her. She can't convince them to stay. They think it's way too dangerous and she should leave too. She tries to recruit more workers, but you feel at times, and it's a very hard film at times to sit through, but you feel at times that we're developing into a horror film and something very horrible is going to happen. The white material of the story, of the title, is really all the things that the white people left behind, which are looked on with disdain. They pick up, toys and fancy cigarette lighters. This is all white material. But Marie herself is white material. She feels like she belongs to the land, but she's told the land doesn't want you. But that doesn't stop her. So we get the themes of how violence begets violence, how it infects everyone, and when we see these child soldiers, even they have that inclination with them when all moral codes fade away, that anarchy will ensue, and you can't tell what people are going to do. So Isabelle Huppert is really suited for this role. I mean, she is the strength of the movie. She feels like she belongs to the land. We see her often photographed against the landscapes. In fact, there is much of the movie is looking at people as they move across the landscape. And there is the question of why is Marie staying? And she believes it because she is tied to the land. When her overseer, who of the plantation, he's older, and he stays because he says he is tied to the land. And when Maria tells him, "Well, I feel that way too," he says, "Maybe you don't want to lose your possessions." And she laughs at it. It's the only moment of laughter, I think, in the whole film. But I think she says something else that really struck me. She says about going back to France, or going to France. We really don't know whether she's actually from France. She says, "How could I show courage in France?" So courage to Maria is really the definition of who she is. And where these men she's living with are all rather, you can't rely on them, but she's got the courage to go on, the determination. So the genesis of this film is that Isabelle Huppert went to Claire Denis and says, it's a long time that we need to work together. And Huppert recommended Doris Lessing novel set in South Africa. It was a period story, and Claire Denis did not want to do another period story set in Africa because she had already done one with Chocolat. And so Denis read remembered articles about in the Ivory Coast how the French coffee plantation owners had to be evacuated by helicopter during the Civil War in that country. It was too dangerous to work in the Ivory Coast, but she was brought up. She spent the first 13 years of her life in Cameroon, and they too had coffee plantations. So she took that germ of the idea of the French having to leave, some of them having been born in that country and lived most of their lives there. So she films in Cameroon and using African writer Marie Dedayu to help her with the screenplay. And it's very much a stripped down type film. There were times I was thinking, it seemed like it was a condensed version of a much richer and wider story because we don't really get to learn a whole lot about who these people are. They're photographed and we see them in some of their interactions, but it's really difficult to get a grasp on who exactly they are. Of course, this is very much a European art film, so this is an elliptical style. It's flashbacks and flash forwards. We move around in time, and it's an aesthetic that I'm not particularly crazy about, but it is an aesthetic. And I have to say, White Material was a film that I struggled with whilst I was watching. It's not an easy film as far as the content of the story and the this impending doom that you feel. But afterwards, I sort of put things together a little bit, and this aesthetic, even though it's not an aesthetic I particularly care for, it is a legitimate aesthetic. And Claire Denis had worked as assistant director on with Wim Wenders in Paris, Texas. She worked with Jim Jarmusch as well as an assistant, and you get to feel some of the influence that those two directors have on her style, and so we get. And there was other things that bothered me. This was the period of the jiggly handheld camera. Luckily, I think that affectation, that trend, has sort of died down. in recent years. So that bothered me, and also as I say, the stripping down of the story. And it probably, because it is a European art film, it's not intended for a wide audience. It's intended, for film festival goers and big city, cinephiles. But there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm not criticizing the film or Claire Denis for that, because I had not seen that. I've seen Chocolat, and I've seen another film. I can't remember the name of it. It was outer space kind of film, and it had that similar stripped down. You get these intense scenes, but you really don't know who these people are very much. You're not given much information about these people, these characters. So, this is a Criterion release. There's a terrific interview with Claire Denis, and another one with Isabelle Huppert. And again, she is so intelligent, and it's such a great interview. You really get a sense of her dedication to the roles and what she thinks about them, whilst still acknowledging that there's a mystery, and there's certainly a mystery to Marie's character, and really all the characters in the film. There's also a supplement where Claire Denis goes back to Cameroon, and they're going to show, there's a film festival there, and they're going to show this white material for the first time to the people of Cameroon. The actors were all African actors, and they were in awe of Isabelle Huppert, for one thing, and they were just terrified they were going to flub a line. And but Claire Denis, when she went back to Cameroon, she films this little documentary, just like a little diary kind of thing of her going back to Cameroon, and there's no movie theaters in Cameroon, so they couldn't. They had to shoot it in a non-film type venue. And they had old equipment, and she brought a beta copy, and because they had machines for that, and she brought a DVD. But she worried about it, so this is just, will it actually be able to be seen? And it was highly anticipated, because it was a film, a French film, filmed in Cameroon. And as it turned out, it was a disaster. The beta equipment wouldn't work. The DVD was too dim. The sound was never right. So she was very unhappy about that. Hopefully, it's been shown since that, and I think this may have been in 2011, a couple years after the film was originally released. So that'll wrap up my Isabelle Huppert series. There's going to be more, though, hopefully. Later in the year, I think there's 2 Chabrol films. I think she made 7 films with Claude Chabrol, and I think I've covered 5. So there's 2 more Chabrol films. And there's, in her prolific film career, I'm sure I'll be able to find another one that will be equally as interesting as the 3 films that I've talked about in this series. Thanks a lot for everybody who managed to listen. I appreciate it. Comments are welcome. Take care.